Hey everyone, and welcome back to the studio. Today, I'll be demonstrating how I paint sliced oranges, one of my all-time favorite subjects. Thank you all for the great suggestions for videos, by the way. I'm excited to make those. For today, though, let's get started on this orange. We'll start off, as always, by spreading a bit of medium onto the surface of the panel. Just a very thin coat to help the brushstrokes flow onto the surface. From there, I'll mix a color to draw with. I like to use a combination of burnt umber and ivory black. Decent amount of medium in this mixture here as well. I want it to be thinned nicely, but not to the point of being too transparent. With a brush load of this paint, I'll come up to the panel and use some small hash marks to find the outside edges of what will be the orange. Using those hash marks as my guide, I'll begin drawing the outside line work. You'll notice that for now, I'm ignoring the fact that it's missing a slice. I'll come back and I'll draw that once I have the rough circle of the entire orange in place. I'll use a paint eraser tool to clean up some of the heavier line work. That umber and black mixture will mix with the color once I get into that, if I leave too much of that drawing behind. Once the line work is cleaned up, I'll find the point where the stem of the orange sits within the overall shape. I'll also draw a line to represent the angle at which the orange is tilted and the slice has been taken out. From there, I can start to draw the big, sweeping curves of each side of the missing slice, each of which meet at points along that center line. Getting the perspective of these correct can be challenging, but it's important. Make sure you take your time to represent them accurately. I'll come back again with my paint eraser tool to clean up the heavy paint lines and just remove the parts of the original outline where the slice is now shown. With the drawing in place, I'll start mixing some color. I always like to start with the shadow side of any object that I'm painting, so I'll grab some burnt umber, burnt sienna, and cadmium orange. I'll mix that straight into my original pool of umber and black. If it gets too warm in temperature, I'll throw some raw umber and some black into it to cool it back down. I begin drawing the shape of the shadow on the outside of the orange using simplified angles and starting near the stem. I then begin to block in this shape with the color that I mixed. I have a decent amount of medium in this mixture just to make sure that the paint is relatively thin. What we're painting here is called the turning shadow, which is pretty dark. But as the shadow wraps down around the form of the orange, it starts picking up what's called reflected light. This is a subtle light, though the value is still pretty dark, that is being bounced up into the shadow from the surrounding area. I'll introduce some ochre and titanium yellow into my shadow mixture to both lighten it up and cool it down in increments to show this bounced light. You'll notice that I'm depicting this orange as floating, not sitting on a table, but I want to show this reflected light anyway. With the shadow side and reflected light in place, I'll start rendering the form on the light side of the orange. I'll clean my brush out with some medium and grab some cad orange, cad lemon, burnt sienna, and a touch of cadmium red to mix a bright, rich orange. For bright yellow and orange objects, I like to start in the brightest area, which is up on the left side, and work my way down towards the shadow. This helps me keep the color very pure for as long as possible. The shadow mixture can really infiltrate things and muddy up the color if you're not careful. A touch more cadmium lemon brightens the orange up around where the highlight will be, and then the form starts to turn down towards the shadow. I'll add more touches of cad red and burnt sienna to darken the value, but retain the saturation of the color as it does so. Where light meets shadow, I'll switch to adding burnt sienna and burnt umber to the mix to cool down and desaturate the color, as well as transition it towards the dark. Gentle brushstrokes of these transitional values help soften the edge between the light and the shadow. I'll remix some of the lighter value to show the glowing edge on the right side where the light is passing through the skin. I also paint the small area that's catching light on the right side of the stem and use the same technique to soften those edges. With the outer skin of the orange painted, it's time to move on to the inner surfaces. I'll start on the left side, which isn't being hit with light. I'll mix a more desaturated orange with cadmium lemon, orange, burnt sienna, and a touch of both of the umbers and alizarin. It's a complicated soup of many different pigments, but it's perfect for this inner flesh of this orange. I'll use this mixture to draw the crescent shape of the orange flesh, leaving blank space for the lighter rind for now. Though it's in shadow, this area actually does have some light passing through it, so I'll brighten up this mixture of paint with touches of the cadmiums to show that this light is refracting through this juicy orange. You'll see I erased a bit of the original drawing line as well, which will help it from mixing into things later. I'll clean my brush and really go for the brightest, purest yellows and oranges on the right side of the slice here. Lots of cadmium lemon and a touch of orange. I'll again block in the crescent shape of the orange flesh. This will get progressively brighter as it moves towards the front of the orange, so I'll switch to mostly cadmium lemon and titanium yellow as it does so. I'm leaving blank space for the white rind on this side as well. Speaking of rind, it's time to paint that. I'll again start on the shadow side. Yellow ochre, raw umber, and a touch of black make the cool, almost beige color of white rind in shadow. I'll bring that into the blank space that I left for it, right up against all the other values that we have in place so far. There's lots of light being bounced up into this, so it'll also brighten and warm up as it approaches the front of the orange. I'll add more ochre, titanium yellow, and touches of white into it to show this. All of this refracted and reflected light in the interior of the orange is key to making this thing really glow. What I'm doing here is focusing on the gentle transitions of lighter and darker areas of this rind, as well as the shape it creates against the orange flesh. I'll also block in the details of the deepest parts of the interior orange, where this side meets the center line. This helps define that signature crescent shape of orange slices. Moving on to the rind on the light side now, I'll use lots of white and titanium yellow to mix what will be the brightest values in the painting. I'll again bring this right into the blank space that I left for it, making sure it has nice, soft edges where it meets the orange flesh. This is where it's important to have nice, light drawing lines. Too much of that umber and black will ruin this bright color. I'm working with a lot of thick paint here, so I'm just carefully working my way through this step, making sure I don't lose the drawing and that there aren't too many hard edges. I want to show that this rind, like the whole area, is brightest at the front of the orange. I'll darken things ever so slightly with bits of ochre as the rind swings around towards the back. Painting all of this takes some precision. I want the edges of the rind to be soft where they meet those bright oranges, but I still want it to be defined. I'm making sure to use some careful brush strokes to maintain that balance. You'll see I come back to adjust the glow coming through the very edge of the slice. I wanted it to be a bit brighter and with some softer edges against all that bright white that I just put down. I'll be adding a warm, dark background to the painting, so I can already tell that my reflected light needs to be a bit brighter. I'll mix some raw umber, black, white, and titanium yellow to my existing reflected light mixture to brighten it up and cool it off a bit. Then I add it to the shadow side, letting it blend gently with the existing paint there. It also warms up slightly on the left side of the orange, so I'll add some burnt sienna and umber into it and let it softly transition up towards the light side. Time for some background. I want a simple, thin mixture of burnt umber, burnt sienna, and black. This will complement the warmth of the orange and automatically help this thing look like it's glowing. Lots of medium mixed into this, and the ratio for now is more burnt umber and sienna than black. I flip my canvas over to more easily make the brushstrokes I need, right up against the left side of the orange. Again, I'm keeping this background really thinned out with some medium, so much so that it's almost a glaze. The brush I'm using for this background is really old and really worn down. This helps me get some nice scrubby texture to the background while keeping the paint nice and thin. As the background transitions away from the orange, I'll add more burnt umber and black to the mixture to darken it. This again just helps push the sense of glow coming off the light side of the orange. Again, you'll notice the nice texture that this brush gets me. It's very scrubby and organic, almost like using a sponge or something. I really like this texture for backgrounds. I just want to mention again that as the background moves away from the orange, I'm just using more burnt umber and black to darken it. There's lots of thin paint on the panel, so I'm able to easily move things around to make sure I have a relatively smooth transition from light to dark. With the background complete, I'll quickly block in the little point of green on the stem where it's catching some light. Some black, ochre, and cadmium lemon make a nice subtle range of greens. Now, I'll show you how I paint the glow coming off of objects. This is a subtle thing that I approach pretty carefully. I'll mix a darker version of the orange with burnt sienna and some of the cadmiums. I'm shooting for something in the value range between the background and the orange skin. I'll bring this right up to the edge of the orange with careful brush strokes. From there, I'll mix a darker version of the same color and let it gently blend up into the pink of the background. I'll work back and forth, mixing both darker and lighter versions and letting them blend in a soft gradient as the glow moves away from the orange. The brightest, purest versions of this glow will be closest to the edge of the orange and will actually soften the edge away almost completely. I'll quickly mix some titanium yellow and some white for the little highlight on the light side of the orange as well. From there, I'll add some more detail into the interior, just softening edges and brightening up a few values as I go. All of these little adjustments really help this thing glow. By brightening the flesh of the orange here, what I'm showing is that there's not only light passing through from the left side, but there's also a lot of reflected light bouncing off of the right side of the sliced surface. I'm mixing some more of the cadmiums, mostly lemon, into my previous mixture to show all of that light being bounced around. Again, this pushes the sense of glow in the interior. Speaking of glow, I mix a cooler version of the rind to show that light is bouncing off of the right side of the orange. Using the same technique as I did earlier, I'll bring this value right off the edge of the orange and up into the background, getting progressively darker and softer as it moves away. At this point, I'm just working my way around the orange, adjusting edges and values. I brighten up the reflected light one last time as well, just to pull that shadow side up away from the darkness of the background. As I make these adjustments, this is a good time to point out the value of keeping all of these pools of paint on my palette. As I refine things in the painting, I'm able to return to paint that I've already mixed as a quick reference for the changes I'd like to make. I have to mix very little from scratch and can push and pull things around with ease based on what I need. If I need a darker orange, I can darken an orange that's on my palette. If I need a cooler reflected light, I can adjust that as well. It's incredibly useful. As I make the final changes here, softening edges, adjusting value, adding a bit more glow, this painting is approaching its finish. I've painted what feels like a million oranges over the years, but they honestly still feel like a shot in the dark sometimes. There's a lot of information to simplify and lots of boundaries that can be pushed, but I was pretty happy with how this turned out. As we close out on a close-up of the brushwork, I just want to thank you all for watching. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to watch me paint next. I love hearing your ideas. Thank you again, and I'll catch you all in the next one.